Now, this morning, we have a very interesting guest here. Joining me in the studio, we have a delightful gentleman called Ayo Johnson. Is that pronounced that right?
Absolutely spot on, mate.
Yeah, Ayo Johnson. Very good. And as you can hear from his accent, he has spent a lot of time in UK, but you haven't seen him in person because you're from where?
I'm from Sierra Leone. I was born in Sierra Leone.
Exactly. What a wonderful... And why are you in Kenya, more importantly?
Well, we're here to be part of the digital conference that's taking place at KICC from today, 15th, all the way up until the 18th. So it's going to be a spectacular conference that brings together all the major players around the world, people who are experts in the digital marketing environment, and they're here to connect the dots, provide practical solutions for the common Kenyan and for business solutions to be able to synergize, to be able to develop and evolve within the technological advancements which is clearly happening across the African continent.
Gosh, there's a lot there. Okay, we'll come on to that shortly. So basically you're here to sort of... it's the first of its kind, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's the first of its kind in terms of size and in terms of bringing all the experts from around the world, which, as you know, logistically could be very difficult, and for them to actually come to Kenya here. And of course, we've chosen Kenya specifically because it's a focal point for digital advancements as far as we're concerned. And we want to send a loud and clear message across the world that Africa is ready for business and very much on the advancement in terms of technology.
Grand. Okay, well, listen, we'll come on to that very shortly. I think our listeners, first of all, would like to know a little bit about you. So you grew up in Sierra Leone.
That's
Your
correct.
parents were miners.
Yes.
So you grew up in a sort of mining town or something like that?
That's correct. Yeah.
Do you remember that? How old were you?
Well, I was young. I was. Well,
I said how old were you when you grew up? You're obviously young.
Yeah, but yes, in my youth, we were in the mining up until I was about 12, 13.
Oh, so very clear memories.
Yes, and of course my parents stayed there still because my parents used to be in the diamond mines, and then they went to another mining company which was mining rutile and bauxite, and of course I had to come into town to go to secondary school, so I had to leave my parents behind, and of course naturally when I had to come overseas to do university and things like that, so I do even to stay behind. So yes, that's how it's actually transpired. But my parents are still in Sierra Leone, and I'm very much a man of Sierra Leone. But of course now I'm based in Britain. My family's in Britain. So
and you must have been affected by the Civil War and
absolutely. But, I mean, my parents personally were affected. Our houses were destroyed. We lost possession. But I think most important is you can get away with material goods. You don't have to worry about that. Most of it's personal life. So we're happy that everyone's still together.
And now you're basically based in UK now.
That's correct. For once to describe me, I'm a journalist, and I've built a brand around Africa, and without being cocky about it, but I do address the major concerns of the continent in the diaspora with major television and radio stations from across the world. So that's what I do.
Well, a real pleasure to have you here. And as you mentioned, you're here for the Digital and Internet Marketing Conference, which is happening at KICC. It started yesterday?
Starting this morning.
Starting this morning. Gosh, so we have to rush you through here very quickly. Your first time to Kenya?
It's the first time to Kenya, and of course Kenya is great. The people are warm, and
we are very charming people.
And from a technological advancement perspective, I can see that technology is a major focal point here. Everyone seems to have a mobile phone, involved in technology, involved with their computers, and everyone seems to be addicted to Facebook. So it's very good.
Yeah, well, listen, we'll have a little chat about that coming up very shortly. I mean, one of the things which you probably know was launched yesterday was this online bus ticketing system. It's called emanamba.com, which is for Kenyans anyway, it's the first time we can actually go and book online through our mobile phones tickets for the national buses, make reservations, pay for it, etc., using M-Pesa's app and all the other things we have here. And that came out yesterday. So you guys have obviously, everyone's worked out now this is a season for all this exciting stuff to happen.
Well, it's not only exciting in Kenya, it's excitement across Africa. But you can see in North Africa, where the communities are slightly more advanced in terms of technology, how communities, as we're seeing revolutions across the North African part of Africa and the Middle East. So I think technology is playing a huge place, and you can see how civil society are using it to coordinate and galvanize themselves, and I think technology is here to stay, I'd say.
Grand. Well, listen, we've got a good half an hour to talk through all of this. Just to encourage anyone who's listening, I mean all our listeners, our numerous listeners, Do send us any tweets at 984 in the morning, or email us at breakfast@capitalfm.co.uk, or even go to our Facebook, Capital in the Morning, and ask any questions you'd like to ask Ayo about social media, digital media, all that sort of stuff.
Anything across Africa.
Anything across Africa, because he's the man to go to at the moment. We're very lucky to have him here. Particularly, we'd like to talk about the mobile phone technology and mobile phone marketing. That would be very interesting, I think, to talk through with some people.
With their communities, interact with their businesses, especially for price checking, for getting to the market on time, and for them to be able to coordinate themselves within their social environment. And as we do know, a lot of women's lives are burdened around the world, full stop, not to mention in Africa, and the telephone and computer application would only advance the use for them to be able to use this application to improve their lives and make things easier for them. So from a social perspective, that's how. From a macroeconomic perspective, I can see how technology's advancement, especially with the banking sector, how that's improved, especially with interaction with business to businesses, and very much how communities interact with the rest of the world through Facebook, internet, Twitter, social networking sites. So I think the revolution as a whole is growing. There's no definition as to how far it will go, but the growth of it, as we've seen in the West, is unlimited.
And I mean, have you seen much in terms of applications which have been generated by Africans for Africans?
Not that many, because you're looking at the big brands, which are sadly not African-led brands. But I think it will be a matter of time before Africans start creating those applications and branding it themselves. And as we know, branding is a very difficult exercise. It involves a lot of marketing and a lot of financial injection to build that brand enough for people to be able to know it and understand it. But I think it's highly possible. But the brands that are out there are very much not necessarily African per se.
So, but there's room there. I mean, I think one of the interesting things I find is how many, certainly from a Kenyan perspective, how many Kenyans actually work with a lot of the big software manufacturers, mobile phone companies globally. And one wonders at what stage will they come back and actually be seeded in their countries like Kenya.
Well, I think these big brands are always going to try and find ways to interact with the common Kenyans or common African. I think it remains to be seen how whether Africans or Kenyans can embrace this technology with the brands as they are now, or whether if a Kenyan, for example, were to create a brand that's clearly going places, whether everyone will move camp and switch and join that brand simply because it's a Kenyan owned brand as opposed to being a brand from the United States or elsewhere in the world. So it remains to be seen, but I think Kenyans are savvy enough to be able to choose for themselves.
Yeah. Now, you were talking earlier on about the downside of some of the technological advances, people locking themselves away, isolating themselves. I mean, one of the stories coming out of the UK today was this woman who used Facebook during a drugs trial, one of the jurors, to get in touch with one of the defendants and befriended him, did a search on Facebook, etc. And now she's going to be charged for contempt of court and probably go to prison for that. I mean, there must be lots of different instances where it's a double-edged sword. Is how do we use it? We've seen the social media, the role it's played in the Arab Spring. There's obviously also downsides as well. How does one get the balance between promoting the sort of the positive side of it as opposed to promoting perhaps some of the negative sides of social media and digitalization?
Yes, I think that the major concern for social media is how we protect children, because they're the most vulnerable of groups, because you do have people who prey on their vulnerability. But in saying that, I think everyone's got to be aware and understand that the internet is a very creative environment, but it can be a very dangerous one, and you've got to be careful what information you do put there. But you must be prepared that whatever information you do place in a public domain remains public. So you should actually ensure that you keep as much private information out of there as you otherwise do. But a lot of people are putting a lot of private information, and they do come on stock, as you've just clearly mentioned. So my advice is don't put anything on the internet unless you know you're wishing to share it with everybody else.
Grand. Now, one other thing, which I mean is news that came out yesterday, was this whole issue with Nokia and Apple, who'd had this battle over patents, and Nokia had sued Apple for infringement, and Apple countersued. When these big elephants fight in terms of mobile phone or software companies, etc., what's the benefit for us?
I think it pushes the prices down. It can bring better applications to the market quicker than otherwise. It could force them to be able to reconsider their market share and their market growth strategy. But I think it's mainly in terms of price, the type of applications that are coming out on the market, and the availability of those applications, and that's where the consumer benefits. But when you have these giants who are quarreling and in the fashion you just expressed, it just shows that they're taking this thing very seriously, and they all want a slice of this huge market. What we do not want is just Apple and the other companies who are multinationals to be getting this opportunity. We want African companies to be evolving and growing and taking a share of that.
Great. Okay, well, after this little break, we're going to come back, and I'd love to talk to you about, we've got a question here from Chantal, who said, where do you start in formulating a digital marketing strategy? And maybe you could put your great brain to that. And we're in the last 10 minutes of that time with Aya Johnson, who's come over from the UK, born in Sierra Leone, travelled the world widely, a commentator on all things African, and he's here because of the Digital and Internet Marketing Conference, which is happening in KICC this morning, and it's free for Kenyans for the next 2 or 3 days. Get yourselves down there. Now, in terms of the question we'd asked, in terms of a digital marketing strategy, your advice to me just now was tell them to come to the conference, and they will find out all about it, which sounds very sensible.